Yeah, I mean, so I love video games. I love the video game business, and I especially love like indie video games. The games business is the biggest category of viewing on all of YouTube, next to music, right? So I helped start this company years ago called Machinema, which is like the first YouTube company, right? And so we were building stories using video game engines as kind of like a poor man's Pixar, right? And then as we got bigger, we started making content inside of games like Halo and built like the world's largest Halo community. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so, we just looked at like the data of how big video games is as a cultural movement, how much viewing is happening on YouTube. Hollywood at that time, this is like 10 years ago, thought of video gaming as niche, right? And we were like, it's 3 times bigger than the movie business, and it's a massive category of viewing on all of YouTube around the world. It's by definition not niche, right? Like, it's like indie movies is cute compared to video games, right? And so that intersection now, Hollywood is paying a lot more attention to, because you've had The Last of Us, Fallout, Borderlands. Well, one of them is not great. The other 2 were amazing. But like the attention to video game IPs, right? So it's a big category. There are a lot of cultural categories. Like I mentioned K-pop Demon Hunters. Hollywood for a while has thought of that as niche, right? If you know anyone under the age of 30 around the world, it's not niche, right? Bad Bunny is the biggest touring artist in the world, right? So how is reggaeton niche, right? That's why we like culture, and youth culture in particular, right? That could be hip hop, that could be street skating. These are proxies for audience at the end of the day, right? And so the traditional Hollywood system doesn't really know how to evaluate or put numbers around what that means, because the whole kind of history of valuation in the industry is really pegged off of kind of outdated data sets, right? Historical box office. This actor did this in historical box office, right? So that's why they look at things that are outside of that very insular, in our view, sort of systemically biased and calcified data set, and say, I don't know how to evaluate street skating, right? Because there's like a Kevin Bacon movie called Gleaming the Cube. There's like not that many street skating movies, right? And so if you look through a backwards filled data set for your proxies for future, right, you're always gonna kind of be relying on the same things that worked in the past. You look at video gaming, street skating, hip hop. We have had this like movie with the recording artist Vince Staples. It was a big recording artist. And this was a few years ago. We pitched it to a bunch of Hollywood people. They were like, oh yeah, but hip hop is kind of niche, right? It's like, it's the biggest category of streaming on all of Spotify in every territory of the world. It's by definition not niche, right? And so the kind of the language around how we talk about it, that they understand is these are proxies for audience demand. These are communities that are vibrant, that are big, that spend money, and Hollywood is not really serving those communities, right? So I went on a tangent a little bit, but your question around games is, yes, games, right? So if you can make games, amazing. Start making an indie game. You could make an indie game that gets developed as an IP for film or television, right? That's why I'm still optimistic and kind of inspired by young filmmakers, because we meet a lot of young filmmakers who are like, oh, I built the website, I did this, I did that all myself, right? Our era, it was like, no one knows how to do that stuff.
That sounded super daunting.
Yeah.
When we were coming up, yeah.
Yeah, you can, I edited it, I did all the After Effects on my MacBook. Like, you've got a lot of tools available, and you've got a lot of different ways to incubate IP, whether that's like through audio, through a graphic novel, through a website you stand up and you start putting little snippets out. It's kind of like building the IP, because Hollywood doesn't really know how to assess that IP unless it's a New York Times bestseller, right?
Yeah, the market validation side of that stuff now is very interesting, where like I know a guy, just talking about optimistic stories on this, met a guy at South by this year, South by Southwest, where he's he's funding his films, they're really branded content deals, but nobody can really tell. But because they all take place outdoors, like, there's a whole bunch of branded content in there, so he's profitable by the time the film comes out. And then he's also retaining the rights because he has the ability, because he already made his money back, to go, I'm not going to take a bad licensing deal. And then he only does licensing deals that make sense to him. And then on top of that, he's self-distributing. So he set up the same thing you're saying, where he set up his own website, where he's like, you go on here, you subscribe, and you get access to all of his films.
But I think the IP thing, you know, makes perfect sense. You know, everybody has a screenplay, but screenplay, technically, yes, it's IP, but can you go on Amazon and buy, you know, I guess you could throw your screenplay up on Amazon, but I had a film that we were going to produce in 2020, I think we were talking about this, and because COVID, the whole thing falls apart, and I spent a year and a half trying to recast it, and then at one point I was like, why don't I just turn this into a comic book? And so I turned it into a graphic novel that I just released at the end of the last year. It's like this 216-page graphic novel that's now an awesome proof of concept for the feature film, basically. I didn't draw it myself. I hired an artist and all that, and I had written the script, but I didn't know how to translate it into a comic book script, even though I'd been a collector for many years, and so I learned how to do that, and then worked with an artist, and it took us a year, and next thing you know, you've got a comic book, and be like, okay, here's something that exists.
Yeah, going back to just finding some form of market validation. You know, an IP is one of those things, at least you can point to it. I mean, I remember I had a producer friend tell me a story. She had a script in this financier's inbox for like months, and he just wasn't reading it. He wasn't reading it, and she kept following up. And then one day she got frustrated. She found a podcast that covered the same like true story, and just sent it to him and said, "Here's the story," and it's featured in this podcast, and he like bought the script the next week because he listened to the podcast and knew, okay, there's an audience for this.
That's a great example. You are seeing more people validate their ideas through podcasts now too. Like you're seeing people, they'll release, instead of making the pilot video version of it, they'll do the pilot audio version of it.
I have a friend who's a young filmmaker. She's written a TV pilot and series, and then she built a chatbot, an audio chatbot. So when she submits the material, there's a number you can call and just ask it any questions about the story. Tell me about the characters. Who's the audience for this? What happens in the end? Like, and it's just like, oh wow, that's cool.